everyone. Right, let me just pull up my questions so I know what I'm asking everybody. There we go. So hi everyone, welcome to the second panel for Killer YA Con. This is the Twisted Realities panel, and I am so lucky to be joined by everyone here. We'll do like some quick intros in a minute, but just to let you all know, the panel is going to be about half an hour, and then with like 10-15 minutes for questions at the end. So are you ready? So I am Naomi Gibson, and I'm the author of Every Line of You. It's about a lonely girl who creates her own artificial intelligence to love her, and it has beautiful red sprayed edges, which you need in your life. So let's go to Ben. Ben, do you want to go first?
Yeah, hi, I'm Ben Oliver. I wrote The Loop, which I just haven't. A thriller about these kids who are locked up in a death row prison, and they couldn't take part in medical and scientific experiments, or push back the date of their execution, but then things are going wrong in the outside world. So it's all about them trying to overcome these hardships.
Yeah, it's such a good read. It's so quick as well, so fast paced, but we'll get to that later. Kitty, do you want to go second?
Book. There we go. There's my copy.
Yeah.
So I don't get sprayed edges, but I do have shiny gold. Yeah. So the book is written by me. I go by Kettle. Some people call me Catherine. Some people call me Kitty. Some people call me Kate. That's why I go with K. That's the only reason. And I wrote this book to kind of talk about the things about feminism that I was asking questions about myself. And I wanted to write a story that came at the questions that are raised about gender equality and equity from a different perspective. So in my story, a young boy called Jude is raised in a very misandristic society, sort of the post-apocalyptic world run by women, and power corrupts everyone. Doesn't matter what you've got biologically. And so he's trying to find his way to survive in this society. And he's been set on a task to assassinate the woman in charge, but he doesn't really want to do it. That's my story.
Mm-hmm. It's such a good read. I was totally hooked by it. I really, really enjoyed reading it. So hats off to you for that one. Femi, do you want to go?
Yeah. So I'm the author of The Upper World. It's a story about love, violence, and the physics of time travel that just so happens to take place in Peckham, South London. The story basically follows a 16-year-old boy named Esso, who's wedged between two very different friendship groups. And one morning on his way to school, he's wanting to catch the bus and gets hit and knocked out of, not just out of consciousness, but out of reality as we know it, and into this place called the Upper World, where he can see time, his past, and future all in one place. And he decides that he's going to try and change both his future and his past. And the second character is a girl named Ria, who's 15, who's also trying to go back into the past and change what's happened. So they go on this journey together and sort of have to fight to find a future worth fighting for.
It's so good. You know, like when I was reading it, I felt like I learned stuff. Like physics was never my strong suit, I've got to say, when I was at school, but like with all the diagrams and stuff in the back, I was like flipping to it and I was like, oh yeah, like I totally get it. So clearly I didn't have the right physics teacher.
I'm through Every Line of You, and it's an absolute page turner, honestly.
Oh, thanks. That's really sweet.
Yeah.
Right, so my first question, now that we've done our introductions, so when I wrote Every Line of You, I never realised I'd written a thriller until my publisher said to me, you know, we really like your thriller, it's great, that's what we're going to market it as. And I was like, oh, so like that's what I've written, you know, because I was querying agents and like I've got this sci-fi story and it's just, that's not what it is, you know. So my question to you guys is, just to kick us all off, is did you know that you'd written thrillers? Like, is that what you'd set out to write? Is that your bag? Is that your genre? Femi, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. So I'm in the exact same as you know. I mean, I basically had no idea I was writing a thriller. I don't even think I knew I was writing a YA novel at the start. But I realized, okay, the characters are 15 and 16 years old, so that makes sense. But I think for me, it was just trying to make a book that was going to sell itself, and that was going to just be a page turner. And I think in a lot of ways that sort of high suspense, and a lot of action is, I think, what defines a thriller. I've read all of your books, and I think the sort of emotional component of it is what makes a thriller a little bit more, I would say. So I think it's a thriller, but I think it's a few other things as well.
Yeah, interesting. We're definitely going to dive into that.
Yeah, I'm a big
Kitty, do you want to go?
fan. I was when I was a teenager as well. But when I first wrote this book, I didn't really know what it was going to be. Probably for the first few drafts, it was much more hard sci-fi and lots of world building and things like that. And then it just became, there was a point where it was originally a dual perspective. I was originally a female lead, and I just kept wanting to write more and more of Jude's story. And because of where he is in society, and because of the kind of drive of him, it became a kind of a box opening. He keeps getting to wider parts of his world, and there's always something pushing back against him. And so it became a thriller. And then I became addicted to understanding. I'm a nerd for story structure and for plot and for what the kind of tropes are, and messing a bit if I can. And then I was all in. I'm like, this has to be a thriller now. I'm going to make it one. And so if anybody didn't say it was a thriller, I was like, oh. So I did the opposite from you. But it didn't start off as one, certainly. And I'm much more, while I love the thrilling element, and definitely, as you said, Femi, it's a really great way to drive narrative. As I wrote, it was interesting. It kind of like peaked thriller. I'm like peak thriller, and it was almost too aggressive and too pacey. And I had to go back in and weave in some of that stuff that was in my head, but no longer on the page. Some of the emotions, some of the world building, things that I had removed from earlier, more meaty drafts, to give the thrill an emotional weight, because it's no point in just being on a roller coaster if you're not afraid you're going to die.
I like that. You live life on the edge. I love it. So I get that. So like you started off writing this sci-fi thing, and then you honed it into a thriller once you sort of dissected the genre. That's cool. I like that.
Oh, I
you sound like you know what you're doing. Ben, how about you? Did you know you'd written a thriller?
No, I'm exactly the same as you. I didn't set out to write a thriller, and as saying, the publisher started saying, "Yeah, this is a great sci-fi thriller. Yeah, we'll sci-fi thriller," and I was like, "Okay, good." Yeah, I was thrilling, but I didn't purposely, think about the elements of a thriller. I think The Loop is it's just an amalgamation of all the things, all my influences, and all the things that I read and watched and loved when I was growing up. So there's horror elements there. There's obviously a lot of sci-fi elements in there. Always grounded sci-fi, and that's sort of what The Loop is. So yeah, I definitely didn't plan on plotting out a thriller or writing a thriller. All I had was the basic idea of young people in a death row prison, and the main character is all I started off with, really. So yeah, and the story grew and grew and grew from there. So yeah, I definitely didn't plan on writing a thriller, and similar to you, I didn't know I'd written a thriller when I finished. But it's good because now when I do like Instagram live things, I can describe it as a YA sci-fi. It's great.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? Whatever panel you get put on, it's like, oh yeah, it's definitely one of those now. Today it's one of those. Tomorrow it might be a sci-fi. Today it's a thriller. But I think that's funny, like how marketing get hold of a book and they decide what it is and where it's going to sit in a bookshop, and it's quite funny, isn't it? How much of that is decided. What you're writing. But I think for me, now that I know I write thrillers, I'm like, oh yeah, okay. And I have purposely set out to write another thriller for my second book, which is it's not as quite as organic as this one. It's like it's definitely going to be a thriller. So it's I don't know. I don't know. That's an interesting question. It's just different, isn't it? It's just a different book. But yeah, I definitely am more of aware of those kind of cliffhanger edges I think thrillers sometimes come with, cliffhanger endings, sorry, that thrillers sometimes come with. And I think I've definitely kind of got a knack for writing those. For better or worse. Sorry, everyone.
That is such a big, it's such a big component of a thriller, though, isn't it? Sort of ending the chapter with like either a question or a mystery.
Yeah.
Or your cliffhanger
That's
ending.
definitely
You kind of hold on to them with your teeth and just drag on to the next chapter.
Yeah,
it's fantastic.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
definitely.
And that's what I think. That's kind of going back to what Femi said. That's what I wanted, even when I wasn't aiming to kind of tick that thriller box. I wanted something that had pace and that made you, propelled you into that next chapter. And so that the chapters where you don't do that, the quiet ones, the ones where you don't leave it on a question, they really stand out. And they have their emotional purpose. So I was trying to drive forward in the narrative, even when I wasn't thinking it was a thriller. And yeah, I do like a cliffhanger sentence.
You sound like you've totally got writing down, Kitty. Like you're really thinking technically about it all.
In the creative process, I find the way that stories get constructed. It's like Femi with his physics. It is a really fascinating subject to see how things get constructed, and then to make the architecture, if you can, disappear, because the art of it is making it invisible.
Yeah.
Everyone here
very poetic.
How about? I don't know if I'm cutting into your sort of question order, but Naomi, how did you come up with what made you want to include the artificial intelligence? That kind of motif in it. Was that sort of a function of what you wanted the character to go through, or did that start off as the origin point?
That was definitely an origin point for me. So my idea came from a writing class, actually. And I had to come up with I got given like a bag of items, and I had to come up with a character based on my items. And that was how, and I got like a screwdriver, like an adapter, and like some electronic-y bits. And I thought, they're totally going to belong to a teenage hacker. And then I was like, well, what else would a teenage hacker get up to but try and create an AI? And I totally pants the book and it just sort of took off, and Henry became this whole thing. So it's funny how stories strike you. But AI, so I'm a big fan of Elon Musk. I think AI is like so interesting, and he's got some really big ideals on it. And my husband is really into like quantum computing and things like that, and he's always got some YouTube thing on in the background that I end up listening to too. It's just funny how your ideas sort of collide, isn't it, from two different places, and then bam, you've got this teenage hacker creating an AI all of a sudden. So just leading on to my second question, this is not going to take half an hour if we don't carry on. So my sort of what if is, what if a teenage girl could create her own AI? And I thought that all of our books kind of have that sort of what if vein that relate to our worlds. So I wanted to ask you to tell me a little bit about your what if, and we'll go from there. Ben, do you want to start this one?
Yeah, similar to your book, mine deals heavily with artificial intelligence, and it's just the classic sci-fi question of what if artificial intelligence became sentient and didn't like what it saw. And in terms of a what if question, it's one that does get written about and movies made about quite often, but I think it does because it's such an interesting and scary question, and it's something that, it is one of those it could happen type things, so you can't. And I think the fun thing about writing science fiction is imagining, the best and worst scenarios, and we tend to write about the worst scenarios because they're more fun to write about and there's more action involved in the worst scenarios. So yeah, if an artificial intelligence that was, supremely intelligent took a look around at, the people of Earth and what we've done to Earth and what we've done to each other, then, I don't think it would like what it saw, and, it might want to eradicate us. So
when I read your books, I was kind of thinking like his isn't a what if but a when if for me. Like the singularity and stuff, that's like a real threat.
I don't know whether it would be a threat. I'm playing with that idea in my next book, perhaps.
Cool. I think I'll be all over that as well.
That would be really cool, actually, like another view of that, because I do think we constantly project that doom and gloom onto our future and sort of end up fulfilling it.
My view is
that was quite.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say my view
I
is
enjoyed
like that. Actually, it's more often the men behind the machine. That it's the unconscious bias that leaks into the algorithms that is more of the problem than the algorithm.
Yeah, that's true. Because you put so much of yourself into something, don't you, without really realizing, and like you get those like insurance algorithms that are like women are more expensive to insure, and it's because the program was written by a man or whatever. It's like quite interesting.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, Kiki, do you want to answer the question? Sorry. So tell me about your what if.
I will. So my what if was.
That's me.
Oh, sorry. Was it to me? To you, Femi?
No, go ahead.
My audio's cutting.
Well, sorry.
Yeah, no, my what if was really, it's about time. I think, when we learn about time in sort of high school, secondary school, we have this view of like, there's an invisible grandfather clock out there, which is kind of ticking, and we're all synchronized to it. But Einstein's view of time was that actually, we eat like every object has its own clock that's ticking at its own rate. And they generally ticking at the same rate, but depending on things like how fast you're moving or how strong gravity is around, sometimes it can tick a bit slower. And if you get the speed of light, then it completely stops. And you can see like a light beam essentially experiences time, like the 8 minutes it takes light to go from the sun to the earth. That looks like it takes 8 minutes for us, but for the light beam, it all happens at the same time because time is static for across that. So I played around with the idea of saying, if you could see time the way almost a light beam does, so the beginning, the middle, and the end of your life all just laid out in front of you, which is what you see in the upper world. Would you want to see your past? Would you want to change it? Would you want to see a future? And would you want to change that as well? So just playing around with that sort of thing. And I think time is quite a useful metaphor for a lot of things, like, the past being regret and also nostalgia, the future being fear, but also hope. So there's a lot to play around with. So yeah.
Did you plot your book out or did you pants it?
A bit of both. So I think I'm writing my second book now, and I definitely had to plot that one out because it's just so much work rewriting stuff. And my first book I wrote over a longer time, and that was cool because it was my first time. But I think my thing, when I wrote my first book, I pantsed the first draft. Because the number one enemy at that point is just self-doubt, right? So thought, let me get to the end, write something, half decent, half rubbish, and I can work from there. But yeah, moving forward, I'm definitely sort of plotting a bit more just to save time and make it more coherent.
You sound like you've got it sussed, like with all the like your background knowledge about time and things like that. I feel like you don't need to plot because you already know it all so well anyway.
Well, do you know what? Not exactly. I mean, I feel quite lucky about how everything came together in book one. I think I knew exactly what I was good at, and I just doubled down on that. Now I'm writing book two. I'm realizing, shit, there's a lot to
do it again.
So I'm kind of going through the pain and the joy of like becoming a proper writer, and doing a lot of the stuff guys do in your books and just filling in some of those gaps. So yeah, it's quite
yeah, the struggle is real. Kitty, do you want to tell us about your what if?
At the beginning, my what if was, what if the power dynamic for the genders is the other way around? And I didn't want to say, oh well, it would be just fantastic, what a wonderful world it would be, because I don't believe that there's any inherent difference between the way that we perceive ourselves, whether we sit in the middle, we're non-binary or female or male. And I do believe power corrupts. So my what if was, what if we could play this from a different perspective, this tune, and see how it would play out. And I wanted to look at some of the challenges that we see in the modern day, and just to see how they would play out from a different gender angle. So that was mine. It's less kind of hard sci-fi in terms of science and AI, and more political. I think.
I thought that was so fascinating in your book, like the way that it's gender flipped. You almost notice the misogyny a little bit more. Like there was one bit where I think it was Ro was like saying to Jude, like, "Oh, why don't you do the dishes? Like, take your mind off it." And I was just like, "Oh, that is like just so casual." Do you know what I mean? And I was just like, "It's just so clever the way it's just slotted in," and like she didn't even realize what she'd said, and I was like, "That's amazing." So yeah, it was so cool to read. So yeah, in all of our worlds though, I noticed that tech has quite a bit to do with each world. So I wanted to talk about how your world involves it and how you went about writing it. So did you take your inspiration from real life in terms of the technology, or did you take creative license? I think for me it was a little bit of both, like the idea that this AI could be walking around talking to people, you know, there's probably one of those somewhere. But that idea of him downloading himself into a chip and you putting a chip in your arm and he's in your head and talking to you and things like that. I did take creative license there, but I think like Elon Musk might have already done that recently, so it's gonna be real. Ben, do you want to go first?
Yeah, in terms of the technology in my book, I think in book one, it's kind of fairly, it's there in the background, but I really want to write more about the characters. And the fact is, in book one, the world's almost been shut down, technology. There's been this cataclysmic event, and there's no real technology. So everything's lying around, broken, not working. In book two, I want more on technology, and you have kind of a love-hate relationship with technology. The massive positive, massive negatives of technology, just how it can all go wrong, but also it can help humanity almost endlessly. So, yeah, I think I find myself just going back to that theme every time I write, to what is like that Pandora's box technology, and how, how we're not putting the lid, and I can see it going either way. Like the advancements in medical technology are incredible and they're saving lives, but I believe some technology is almost brainwashing in its power, so that scares me as well. But creative life, definitely things like the rich, you can have things like mechanical heart and lungs, implanted into their bodies to make them superhumans, essentially. But in terms of things like drones and surveillance technology, that's just really an extrapolation of this already. Just the drones are now like attack drones with guns attached, and the surveillance is 24 hours a day on every individual person all the time.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
So I definitely creative licenses. Well, I say that, but I can still see all these things coming to fruition and actually happen. So probably all going to happen eventually.
It's funny trying to write that sort of futuristic gap, isn't it? It's like it'll catch up eventually, and we're probably not a million miles away from it. Particularly like the AI watching us all. Do you know what I mean? I think that's quite accurate. Scary. Femi, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, so my story actually isn't that tech focused. Like the way that they access the upper world is a bit more of like a psycho-spiritual kind of thing versus technological. But one of the storylines is set in the future, and so I thought it was easier for me, and I just thought, instead of trying to necessarily predict things with accuracy, just try and play around and make things a bit interesting and funny. So I think at one point, in current day times, they go to like a chicken and chip shop in South London. But by the time it's the future, 2036, this chicken and chip shop is like a massive corporation that kind of also owns, it's a conglomerate of all kinds of things. And but just that idea of like sort of corporate consolidation, and like, I think at some point they're getting chased by drones. And to your guys' point, the algorithms that the drones run on in the future is been programmed by people with biases. And so the police drones are like moving mad, basically, and sort of pursuing teenagers in London in a way that doesn't seem quite right as well. And so for me, it was just about playing around with things a little bit. I think predicting the future these days is so hard because, like, the pace at which technology is going means that you either have to just go insane a little bit, or kind of go a bit, just be okay with the fact that, the technology is probably going to catch up pretty soon, but explore what that could mean for us, I guess. So it's a
like the emotional side of it and what it could mean to you as an individual. Yeah, I like that. For sure.
Yeah, I'm like I said,
Kitty,
it started off quite hard sci-fi, and it turned a little bit more political. So again, I think there's the little bits of technology that are existing still in the world, this post-apocalyptic desert world. It's more about how they managed to survive using technology that still exists from before then. So the whole community is living in a tower, a very, 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 very tall one. And I'm daughter of an architect. Kind of technology that is being to make buildings, in these kind of conditions survive, and power themselves using thermoglass and things like that. But they're dotted throughout, more of kind of like the last gasp of a society that no longer exists, but that is the foundation of the one that they're living in, because the prejudices that exist in this society are today. They're not happening in a vacuum. So much, I think, like Ben and Femi, it's about using technology to show, the places you could go, and the technology we use today is the foundation of where we're going.
Yeah, I thought that, it was great. And also, I thought for your book as well, I really liked how, everybody, there was this focus on what you look like, and like the technology there surrounding like plastic surgery had like really, really evolved. And like, whilst they might have been reliant on, but like, whilst they might have been reliant on stuff that was in the past, they've really like obviously honed like cosmetic surgery, where people could just go in one day and come back out with like the perfect chin or something.
The thing is that is important to the society are not the kind of traditional masculine things, but things that are the more sort of toxic side of femininity, how you look. And they've also used technology to make giving birth a kind of a exactly.
Everyone comes from
just because why would you go through birth if you didn't have to? But it's not really, it's there, but I don't spend a long amount of chapters devoted to reading it. I'd love to, but the thrilling element may drop off the list.
Maybe a non-fiction book coming from Kettle soon.
Which I like, which is very dull to read, but very essential for when you're plotting a kind of a futuristic fantasy.
How did you get time for that? I mean, do you feel the press? Do you feel the press when because the research, like, it adds so much richness to the book, right? And but how do you balance
absolutely no ability to sleep. Maybe. So but no, I mean, realistically, it was a lot easier before I had children. And I used to write. I have a full-time job in the technology world, and that leaves a lot of time in hotels too, or a lot of time in airport lounges, or on public transport. So a lot of my book was kind of written by that and inspired by some of my experiences as a STEM woman in a very male-dominated world. At the moment, I'm definitely snatching 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. to write book 2, and doing my best with it, I think.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Powerhouse. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, it's to everybody here as well. We all hold down other jobs. And, you do it because you love it, don't you? And because you're obsessed with finding out the end of your story. And getting to that ending, and then go, no, that's not how it ends, and you do it until you find that nugget that makes you that lets you step away from it mentally, I think.
I don't find it like your second or third or whatever book that you're now not no longer just like writing on your own time, writing when you feel like it, you have deadlines. Does that change anything for you guys? For me, I find writing the second book really difficult. So I don't know if it.
Yeah, I'm knees deep in book 2 right now, and there's so much. I don't want to say yeah. I would say it's definitely harder. I think just sort of there's so many things that change about what headspace you're in when you're writing the first book versus the second book, and to recreate the magic. I think initially I was trying to sort of go back to the headspace I was in before, but I think that's just a lie, if that makes any sense. And so I've accepted that, thankfully. And I think now I'm just realizing, okay, sort of how do I find a new way to be, and like to be a writer basically, and to get the motivation and the confidence, all that stuff, and the skills that you need to nail the book too. But I think, what I sometimes tell myself is, I could walk out of this building this evening and get hit by a bus. And so whereas my book 1 was sort of me writing everything that I had almost in my life up to that moment, that was part of like the motivation. I think book 2 is just sort of like, well, this could be my last book. So,
Yeah.
I was gonna say that.
By a bus, you'd end up in the upper world, though, wouldn't you?
I had all the time to write books. That's the one thing I want. I'm going to have to pick your brain for me and find out how to stop time so I can actually have the time to finish book 2. But I would agree. It's definitely harder.
Yeah, if you
I think the thing that sustained me through book 1 was I had this question, which is I didn't know what kind of feminist I was. I wanted to find out and really look at things that I'd sort of just taken for granted, both calling myself a feminist flippantly and say, oh yeah, women, great, fantastic, and just sort of throwing that out almost performatively without really actually doing the work myself on what it meant to say that you wanted equity and not have it. The trick for me with this book is I'm trying to find out what is the question I'm trying to answer here that allows me to power through to the end of the story, rather than just, because if it's just writing plot, thing after thing happens, it's got no investment for a reader. But if I'm trying to solve a problem for myself, it could be any kind of problem, just how to get up in the morning and write a book is definitely one of them. Then it gives me the motivation to keep going.
Yeah.
100%. That's definitely what I've realized.
So I have a question about thrillers being scary. So for me, there's a difference between a thriller and a horror book, and for me, I was trying to think about the difference between them. And for me, I thought a thriller is kind of sparks fear that is rooted in the everyday life, whereas a horror might lend from like the supernatural or the paranormal, something like that. And I thought about all the things that we've put into our books, and there are some things that are like quite scary about them. And is there anything in your world that frightens you or is put there because it's one of your worst nightmares and you're trying to, you're putting your own fear on the page kind of thing? So like the idea of an AI taking over my body it's pretty terrifying, even if he is hot, Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. Like, there are quite like strong horror elements in The Loop, and they stem from. Think of it like I watched the film Aliens when I was far, far too young, and there's this this underground subway tunnel that's full of these rats that want to eat my main character, and that is pure Aliens. It's just like I've just taken the way I felt when I was like 10 years old, too young, watching Aliens, and just being absolutely terrified and trying to read that in the story. So Killer Rats is not really grounded in reality. That I am going almost full horror there. But yeah, definitely I look at things that scare me, or I look back on the way I felt when I was young and reading horror books or watching horror films, and just trying to recreate that feeling for myself and other people when they're reading the book. I think a lot just try to recreate feelings I felt when I was reading. So yeah, I definitely try to incorporate those horror elements in through.
That section of The Loop where he's in the tunnel with the rats, I thought was particularly scary, actually. Like yeah, it felt really claustrophobic. Like, I think that fear really came across. I'm like, oh my gosh, she needs to get out this tunnel, like, right now. And there's a game, it's called Plague Tale. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of it, but your main character is like it's set in the plague in London and in France even, and she goes around with this torch, and her torch runs out every now and again, and when it goes completely dark, all these rats like swoop in and kill her, and you have to get from one point to the other without the torch going out. And it was like being in that game. I was like, this is not good. So yeah, that was a good scene.
Yeah, I think,
Katie, do you want to go?
Thrillers have an element of horror, and all good horrors have a lot of thrill in them. So they're Venn diagrammatic circles that overlap, and you just have to kind of work out when you want to which button you want to push the most. I think that, for me, the fears of losing your personal autonomy. There's characters in my story who are lobotomized as a punishment, and I think that that's just worse than death, frankly. And I think the fears of not being able to have the power over your own body, which a lot of people have in the world, have to deal with, that there are powers beyond your own which have a say on whether or not you have a choice to make. I think those are very real things to be afraid of, and I think more scary than monsters in a cupboard. But monsters in a cupboard are a really good metaphor for the same thing. There is definitely body horror in my story, and there are elements that require trigger warnings, and I find them more terrifying because they are so based in the fallibility of humanity, which is more realistic to me and therefore more terrifying. So, yeah.
Yeah, so true. Definitely rooted in the everyday there. Femi, how about you?
Yeah, I think in terms of like things that I fear, that sort of might motivated the book. I think the now is probably one, actually, the present moment. I'm one of these people who is always kind of filling my time with busyness, and I'm constantly thinking about the future and the plans for this and that, and lining stuff up, and worrying about it, and also thinking about the past, and if only that conversation had gone a slightly different way, or this and that. And so I've definitely something I've thought about a lot, and I think one of the reasons why I think I tend to skip forward and back in time so much is because the present, there's almost like this underlying fear that the present would consume you if you just sat into it. And I think most people are like this these days. Like, more than 5 seconds of boredom, we just reach straight to the phone.
Very, very true.
That's so true. That happens a lot when I'm writing.
Yeah. And so we just have this like unconscious, like fear, crippling fear of the present. I think a lot of us do, but that was a running theme through the book, because both the characters are trying to travel in time to go and change something that happened outside of the present, when in reality, the answer is in the present. So yeah.
Do you think the present exists?
So true.
Do you think the present actually exists from a physics perspective?
That is a tricky one. I mean, I would have to ask you to define exists to properly answer it, but
I'm gonna have to go for an
you guys like.
I know. We got to do that 100%. I think that the present. Yeah, I mean, this is really in terms of like the backstory of the upper world, or the world building. This is really where it came from, which is that physics tells us that the past, present, and the future exist equally. So it's all just out there existing. Like, time doesn't distinguish between forwards and backwards in time. Physics doesn't make any, like, it's just out there, all there. Whereas our own human experience, it's almost the opposite. We don't get any glimpse of the future, and the past is done. I mean, it might be foggy if you're lucky, but it's gone. It's only the present. And so the upper world was almost my way of trying to, and our experience is important, right? It might not be completely, you can't write down an equation, but our experience is all we have. And so I'm not willing to discount that either. And so the upper world was sort of like a fulcrum where you could join these two contradictory worldviews of how time works into a place and kind of interchange between them.
It's exceptional. Honestly.
Cheers.
So someone's just asked, does that mean the present is the only thing that
Define
actually exists?
I'm using Femi's line now.
Answering a question with a question, I like that.
I think not the only thing exists, but it's the only thing that will ever exist for us that we can fully inhabit.
Experience. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I have to note that I don't know the answer to that question. There's like you could line up a lot of like the 10 smartest physicists, people way smarter than me, and they would all disagree on that. So
like earlier we were talking about the technology that we're writing will probably happen one day. Do you think time travel is a possibility, or do you think it's just something we'll never crack?
So I'm going to answer that in like a couple of layers, unfortunately. So for the first one is, well, time travel already exists because we're all time traveling through time now. And so I think there's two questions that you could subdivide, which is, do you think we could travel into the future faster than we do right now? Which the answer to that is yes. And it's been done before. And the other one is, can you go back in the past? Which is the answer is, I'm not sure. And people have different, there's split in whether you can do that. But in terms of like traveling to the future, that is possible. Like, that's definitely possible. Like, there's just the time dilation of time slowing down the faster you go. That means if you got on a rocket ship and went into outer space close to the speed of light, you could cut, because time would travel slower for you while you're in that rocket ship, you would come back to Earth and everyone you know would be dead. It could be like 200 years in the future because they were traveling through time at a different pace. And they've done this in particle accelerators where they get like for instance, a neutron or something, which is meant to last 15 minutes before it decays, and they'll spin it around super fast, and it just keeps on living for like hours and hours and hours. And so they've actually proved.
Gotta love the Hadron Collider.
So, yeah. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's actually insane. Yeah.
Amazing. So I think we've kind of answered all of my main questions. And I just wanted to ask you a couple of quick. We've had a question from the audience. So are there any book recommendations that you guys have for people who have loved your books and want more? Femi, what about you for time travel sort of stuff?
Ooh, time travel sort of stuff. Well, I'm like sort of 3/4 of the way between the Space Between Worlds. That's a book in terms of like, that's a bit more quantum physics than time travel, but it's all in the mix. But yeah, there's two. I mean, yeah, I'll let you guys keep going first before I.
Okay, sure. Ben, how about you?
I think what I've been reading recently. I've been reading a lot of like big name authors recently. I don't want to recommend them because they get all the.
They get enough money, yeah.
all read in the last year, and they're all amazing. So I just recommend and whatever you're coming out with next. That's what I'm recommending.
That's pretty good.
How
about you, Kitty?
Playing with feminism and power, The Iron Widow, by I need to make sure I pronounce it right, Ziran J. Chow. Beautiful cover and really fantastic story, playing with some fantastic tropes, bringing in mecha and bringing in feminism. It's just fab. And I haven't yet posted my review, but I will. And The Undying Towers just come out by Melissa Welliver, for kind of like post-apocalyptic, again, power play. Really fabulous book. Also recommend.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great. I was going to say The Undying Tower as well. Shout out to Melliver if you're here. We've had another question. So, Guy says, "You're all amazing." Woo, thanks, Guy. Say time travel is invented. You are given one trip. Where or when in time do you go and why? Ooh, Ben, what do you think?
Okay, let me think.
I
mean, if you had that kind of power, you'd want to go and find out some of the unanswered questions, wouldn't you? Like what happened don't know. I'm trying to think of some great historical event that was so far in the past it couldn't have been filmed or recorded that I could go and watch, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. But it would definitely be something. I'd need time to think about it, but it would be something, one of those amazing events
You go back and watch.
were recorded because we didn't have the technology. So to witness something like that.
I think I would I'd be really tempted to go back and learn like lottery numbers or something like that. Yeah. And do it like completely for financial gain.
We got an honest one on the call. I love it.
Oh, no, I'd be tempted. It might not be what I do, but I'd definitely be tempted.
Yeah, we don't do that.
My answer as well, yeah.
I don't.
Femi, Kitty, what do you do?
I think I'd go into the future. I think I'd probably have a go at the future, like pretty far in the future as well, just like maybe 200 years, just to see if we figured this stuff out, to be honest. I hope we have.
Yeah, and then go with the answers. That's a cool idea. I like that. It'd be a little paradox.
I don't know, there's so many things that I could do that would feel magnanimous and feel like they would change the world. It's like the, how would you do world peace thing? But I think I'd probably do something personal and go back and spend some more time with somebody I've lost, because it's the thing you can't get back, really.
Yeah, that's so true. Okay, your answer's fair.
And then I'd
forget what I said. Forget about the lottery.
Like, win the lottery versus visit a loved one. Yeah,
that's not so bad. Yeah, you're right. Okay, that's nice and convenient. Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, so what are you? As we talked about books, can you tell me anything about what you're writing currently? So my book too, I can tell you, is another sort of thriller with a techie element. I'm writing about a girl who gets lost in a VR world. She has a secret, and her secret follows her in, and it starts manifesting in this VR world in kind of horrible psychological ways. All good fun, Kitty, what are you writing at the moment? Can you say anything about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's taking shape. It continues to shape itself, and I continue to find out what it's about. I'm playing with the concept of technology warping the idea of what reality is, in the sense of the way that we perceive the world through the feeds of information we get, and how we then deal with that information, which realities we choose. Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds cool. You're all over the kind of stuff, aren't you? I love the way you talk about writing.
Your mind. But it's yeah. Wanting to be something really good. And, at the moment, it reads like Spot the Dog.
Well, that's a first draft for you, isn't it? Ben, how about you? What are you writing at the moment?
Well, I've just finished writing the third book in the Loop series. So that comes out around April, May next year. So very happy with that. And another thing I would do with time travel is jump maybe 6 months forward and see what I'm going to write next, because I'm sort of
yeah, just pinch your draft from the future. That's a great idea.
So I've got, and I'm working on sort of, I don't really plot, so I'm really just trying to work on little samples here and there of what I want to write next. But I've got some ideas. No. I don't think I can say much about them though.
No, it's all good. Femi, how about you?
Yeah, I'm writing my book too right now. Which is, like I said, it's been quite fun. And sort of having to dig a bit deep to figure out sort of exactly what direction I want to go into thematically. But yeah, it follows off from where we left book one. So we continue following Rhea, and so it's a prequel sequel. So we get to see where they leave off in the future, where there's a new person who comes into the fray, who has ambitions that span the multiverse, and is after Rhea. And then we also go into the past, and we basically go back to Africa, and we see where Esso came from, where the upper world came from in Benin.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, so it sandwiches it. The storyline from book one, basically.
I love a good prequel. Prequels are great, aren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah, I like the idea
it's
of
quite
when
fun
you're dealing
actually.
with time
So
and quantum worlds, doing a prequel sequel. You know, why not do both at the same time? I love it. I like it
Why
when
not?
form follows things.
yeah,
You know, when the story that you're telling and the way that you're telling it match.
100%. So satisfying, isn't it? I think to your point earlier on about how horror and sort of the worlds that you build end up being metaphors for the thematics. I think the more of those metaphors you can layer in at different like higher levels of the hierarchy of structure, the more it feels satisfying for
It's
yourself.
enriching.
And
It's like
anyway,
putting
I'm agreeing.
spices in a sauce. It just why go with basic tomato when you can add some really nice spices in there as well at the same time. See what I did there? It was a metaphor.
Okay, so I think that was a really good metaphor. You're bang on brand there.
I'll leave a crazy one with you. So this is another one. I learned like a couple months back when watching ITV, I think, a documentary about how Snicker bars are made. Right?
Okay.
And the key ingredient is the nougat. That's the most like that's what really gets people. The nougat is made out of like stuff you usually get in nougat, but also Snicker bars. So while they're making the Snicker bars, while they're making the nougat, they crush in Snicker bars into it. So there's this weird thing. It's like
It's just
which
Snickers
one
all
came
the way
first, the
down.
nougat?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Snickers all the way down. Like that one killed me actually.
Well, we will leave you with that snippet thought, everyone. But yeah, so thank you so much for joining me, everyone. And I would get to announce the lucky winner of all our books, plus the loop. I haven't got that one here with me. But the winner of our wonderful books, even, is Hermione Simpson, who entered on both Instagram and Twitter like a pro. Woo! So Hermione, if you could get in touch with us with your address, I'll make sure all your books get sent out to you. But yeah, big thank you to Killer YA for hosting us, and a special shout out to Kev, who did all our graphics and was generally a good tech guy in the background. So thank you, Kev. And yeah, thank you for joining us, everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye.
Cheers.